Good evening. Welcome to Blanc Township Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, October 11th. Mr. Atkins, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll ask for an approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda, if that's in order.
So moved, Mr.
Support.
Any discussion?
Chair. Was that Mr. Atkins that
Yes,
supported it?
Mr. Atkins supported.
Thank
All
you.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will move to citizen comments. Anybody on the left would like to speak? Yes, Ms. Eastern.
Good evening,
Good
Lisa
evening.
Easterwood, here on behalf of the Blanc Township Historic District Commission. I'd just like to give you guys a little update on our event that we had on Saturday. As you are all probably aware, that we had our Fall Pioneer Day event, and wanted to give you an update. We had about, despite the rain, which it was while we were setting up, pouring down rain, so we weren't real optimistic there, but we actually had about 90 people attend. We had about 20 volunteers. 4 of you trustees attended. Thank you very much. We had a petting zoo. This is the first year we had that. That was a big success, and also that was through Chamberlain Pony Rides, and they also did face painting and balloon animals. We had our typical artifacts and local history on display and tours of the house. We also had a rope braiding demonstration using a machine from the 1800s, and there were a few kids that gave that demonstration. We had lawn games, including a rope the steer game. There was free food, and one of the other highlights of that day was from Jacob Sanborn, who is an Eagle Scout, and he offered to help us by building some benches as part of his Eagle Scout project. And he showed up that morning with 5 benches and then 3 additional benches that will be placed along the nature trail. And the benches turned out really great. He used wood, just made them all from scratch. It was really impressive. And we are very thankful to Jacob for doing that for us. And then I'd just like to end with saying that we have a meeting this Monday at 4 o'clock at the Perry Farmstead. If any of you would like to attend, and they are open to the public, if anybody would like to attend, and we would be more than happy to have you there.
What time, Lisa?
It's at 4 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I was out there as well, and the crowd was impressive.
Yeah.
Despite the rainy weather, so
Yeah, it was a
great
lot of
job
fun.
to all of you.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? With that, we'll close public comment and move to approval of the minutes. Either approve them individually or as a whole. I'm sorry, Mr. Massey?
I just say I move to.
Oh, you move to approve the entire
Yes.
4 sets of minutes?
Support.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving to operational issues. One of the projects we've been working on for a little while now is our DDA. And Mr. Laddie, would you like to lead things off?
Sure, I will. I'd be happy to. Tonight is a good night for us because this is really the first sort of visible step that we're taking toward the implementation of our DDA district. And we've already had public hearings. We've already determined what the district's going to be. And one of the requirements of the statute is that we select, in this case, 8 knowledgeable and capable members of the public, that a majority of which need to have some sort of ownership interest in our downtown development district, and also 1 resident of the district. And the process is that Supervisor Bennett will nominate members of the, members to become the DDA board or board of directors, and they will serve as the board's authority moving forward with various opportunities for your review and approval on certain steps in the process. And so tonight, Supervisor Bennett, I think you presented a well-qualified slate of prospective board of directors, and if you want to talk about them individually, or if you want to adopt, if you want to see if the board will accept your recommendations, you could do that first,
Sure.
or whatever you choose.
Okay. Well, we have in front of us, at least the board members do, the list of who I would like to nominate. And Mr. Jeff Gary, and General Manager of Magna Electronics, Ms. Joy Finkenbeiner, VP of Operations for Ascension Genesis, Mr. Jim Tubbs, developer and with property development, Mr. Steiner with Steiner Tractors, Mr. Doug King, the CEO of King Steel, Mr. Wynn Cooper, CEO of Cooper Commercial, Mr. Bob Brundle, CEO of Brightway Insurance, Mr. Nick George, CEO of George Properties. And we have, if these board members are voted into office this evening, we've already taken their names and placed them into a drawing where we actually randomly selected the number of years term of office.
Right, as required by the statute, the first board has to have staggered terms, and so you've
Right.
handled that in a very diplomatic way.
Yeah, so
Mr. Supervisor.
I don't know if Mr. Thomas?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the selected board members with our gratitude and our thanks.
I'll support
that.
Okay, it's been a motion and support.
Discussion?
Yes. Mr.
So,
Mansur.
I have a question about the slate here. So is one of them supposed to be the resident? And if so, how does that factor into the rotation and the selection, that kind of thing?
Well, that's interesting. The statute requires that if there are more than 100 residents in the entire district, then at least one of the members of the board of directors has to be one of those residents. And it's interesting because, I mean, they're now, just as any other of the potential directors, they're now eligible to serve out whatever term they happen to draw, by the luck of the draw. But if they cease to be a resident of that district, then they're no longer eligible to serve in that capacity or in that seat. Knowing, however, that Mr. Steiner was the resident choice, and he's been there longer than I have, so I imagine he'll be there for a while in the future. But anyway, if they stop being a resident, then they will forfeit their seat.
Thank you.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Supervisor, in their motion, would the gentleman be willing to include the terms that you designated on my sheet of paper for 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Would that be proper, Mr. Laddie, to
Yes.
include that?
Yep.
Okay. I'll go through that as far as what terms of office that we drew. Mr. Gary, 1 year. Mr. Brundle, 1 year. For the 2-year terms, Mr. Tubbs and Mr. King. For the 3-year terms, Mr. Cooper and Mr. George. And the 4-year terms, Ms. Finkenbeiner and Mr. Steiner.
I will change my motion to include that.
Okay. Accept that?
Yeah, I accept that. Support.
Okay. I don't know if any of the board members would like to speak. You're more than welcome, but we appreciate, as Mr. Thomas had mentioned, appreciate your willingness to serve. We're very excited as a board to have this DDA actually come to fruition. It's been in the planning for a little while now, and we think that we can achieve some lofty goals with this group, and we're very pleased to have such an astute group. Mr. Massey?
Chair.
Yes.
Would you mind asking those that are present to stand? So we
Sure.
can be
Please
recognized?
stand and, so- yeah.
Mr. Tubbs.
And would any of you like to speak and say just a few words, or? Okay, I'm going to introduce you. In the front row here, we have Mr. Brundle. Okay. Mr. George. And then the back, Ms. Finkenbeiner, Mr. Gary, and Mr. Tubbs here on the left. I don't miss anybody, right? Thank you very much. Ms. Lane?
I thought, Mr. Supervisor, you'd want to remind the board and the community, even though you might have a one-year appointment, when your term comes up, it was done to stagger, then in 1 year, it would be hopefully that you'd want to continue serving, and it would be for a 4-year term for each of you from that point on, once the staggering has been established.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Mr. Laddie?
Anticipating the motion in favor, the next step will be, Mr. Supervisor, you'll contact them all and set up the first organizational meeting, and we'll have
Okay.
discussions about potential bylaws and who might serve as the executive members of that board. And so we will.
Yeah.
the
Mr.
work
Laddie,
will
one of the
start.
things that I'm not sure that all of our board members or even our public, if they haven't been following this, are privy to is the process here. We're contracting with the company to put together a plan, and maybe you can kind of walk through just that briefly.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. One of the main tasks of our DDA board will be to develop for us a development plan which will envision all of the potential improvements that we can make that are allowable under the statute, and actually put them down on paper and give them a price tag and give them a potential date of completion. And I'm talking potentially decades here. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities for projects, infrastructure-wise, marketing-wise, almost anything you can imagine. And because that's such a huge task, Mr. Bennett has alluded to the fact that we're going to get you some help in that regard. We've right now got some discussions going with Rowe about them sending a very experienced consultant to us to help us formulate that plan. And Mr. Potter will be integral in that, as well as Mr. Sears, in making sure that we've covered all the bases as far as potential infrastructure goes. So what's going to happen is we're going to create a very long to-do list, and it's going to span decades, and it's going to involve millions of dollars. And what then will happen is we will put together a financing scheme that will utilize the tax increment financing available to us, where we'll be able to recover increases in taxes in that district and use that money to finance these improvements. And as you can imagine, given the tax scheme, and our board is very familiar with this, giving the normal amount of taxes that we send out of Grand Blanc Township for other purposes, we're going to be able to recapture a large majority of that. And so we're going to be in, hopefully as this begins to develop, we'll be in turbo drive as far as raising money to pay for those projects. Anyway, the development plan and then that TIF financing plan will be completed by the DDA board, be sent back to this board for consideration and approval, and then be implemented hopefully sometime in the I would say early spring. Our target date right now to have the plan in place in both the TIF financing and the development plan are at the latest, we need that in place by May 1st. And so we only really have a relatively short amount of time to get that all together. So again, I think Mr. Bennett will kick off the process by getting you all together, deciding who's going to be chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. So make sure you're there on that day so you don't get railroaded into something that you don't want to do. But also he'll lay out a timeline. We'll hopefully have our consultant in place and be able to provide you with all the tools that you need and information and help to put together a great plan for us.
Is there a time frame, Mr. Laddie, when we need to have the first, or when we anticipate that our first meeting will be within?
No, that's at your discretion, but
Okay.
I would suggest the sooner the better, because again, we do have a lot to do in a relatively short amount of time.
So I'll send out an email in the next day just asking, I know a few of you will probably have holiday plans and what have you, so I'll send out an email asking for some dates of some potential meeting dates. But the authority of this board is quite quite broad and powerful. So we put a lot of thought in, at least I put a lot of thought into our nominations. And the authority that's going to be vested in this board is very broad and great, because once we appoint you, there's a number of things that we'll go over after, when we have our first meeting, that you have the power to do. So our board is entrusting in this board quite a bit of authority. But we're very pleased with, you know, the professionalism that each of you bring and experience that you bring to this board. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Laddie, I think that we also will be operating under the Open Meetings Act and publishing or posting our meetings and minutes and everything else.
That's correct. Yeah,
Yes.
you will enjoy your time in the spotlight, just as these folks get to.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we had nomination and supported. Any further discussion? Just need a roll call vote, Mr. Laddie?
It doesn't, but can we do that just for formality?
Absolutely. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Thomas,
With great gratitude.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
and Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Unanimous.
Well, congratulations, and thank you very much. We appreciate your service and look forward to lots of great things ahead of us. So, if you want to stick around.
Got a good group.
Yeah. He's ill. Okay. Well, I'm excited. We're gonna get the show on the road, right, with the DDA now. Okay, next item under operational issues is the board will consider a motion to allocate $30,000 from the Capital Projects Fund to McFarland Library for needed HVAC repair requested by Bob Foote from McFarland Library Board.
So
Mr.
moved,
Supervisor,
Mr.
I'd like to
Chairman.
propose that motion.
Okay, Mr. Mansour,
I'll
seconded
support
by
it.
Clerk Lane. Any further discussion? We discussed this on Tuesday, and, you know, we're grateful that it's not the $700,000 that's estimated if we were to replace the boiler, or boilers. And I think we're going to actively pursue finding 2 new board members for that board. And Ms. Lane has volunteered to serve in one of those roles. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, can we get a commitment from Clerk Lane that she will have the minimal of interference with the operation of the library when this project is put in place?
Sure, but I have to be appointed by this board first.
Okay.
Well,
But I couldn't hear what you were saying,
Oh.
Mr. Massey, I'm sorry. Could we have a guarantee by Ms. Lane that what?
That when this project is instituted, that it would have a minimal effect on the daily operation of the library?
Oh, that it'll have minimal effect on the daily operation?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm lost.
I don't know if,
I'm lost. What do you, what?
Mr. Massey's concern is that they not shut down the library for, you know.
And he's
a period
leaving
of
it up
time.
to me to keep the doors open.
I thought you were referring to Clerk Lane being on the board.
Well, Clerk Lane has volunteered
Yes.
to serve on the board. I know you weren't here on Tuesday evening.
No,
but Ms. Lane had volunteered,
And I thought,
and we talked about our board. I think we had a consensus amongst our board that nobody had an issue with her serving. Mr. Laddie said it wasn't a conflict. So I don't know, I don't know that it got transferred to the agenda.
yeah, I thought it was supposed to be on the agenda.
But,
Why don't
Mr.
you
Lay-
do this, assuming that your finance motion for the HVAC passes, why don't you consider a slight variation in your agenda to appoint Clerk Lane as,
Right.
as a
Right.
member of the McFarland Library Board?
I would agree.
So we have to redo the motion, right?
Well,
do-
let's
no.
vote on
Let's do it
this.
separately.
So there was a motion and a second on that, correct?
Yes,
Right.
correct.
So any further discussion on the motion with regard to
The
the
HVAC.
HVAC?
So what you're asking, Joe, is that if the, I'm sorry, trustee Massey, what you're asking is if the installation of the HVAC is not going to interfere with the library,
Operation of the library.
The daily operation of the library,
for the HVAC?
yes,
Okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you.
yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So now we'll make a motion for the
If
clerk.
you'd like, sure.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Kirk Lane to the library board.
Support?
To the McFarland Library Board.
Farland, I'm sorry.
It's all right? Okay, and Mr. Massey supported that.
Yes.
Any discussion?
No, I just want to thank you for volunteering to help out, and then hopefully you can find another
Right.
member.
We need to find one other member of the community as well.
Right.
So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Clerk Lane. Item C, the board will consider a motion to approve the extension of water and sewer service boundaries through an amended operating agreement with Holly Township for the purpose of expanding Grand Blanc Township's customer base and authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign the agreement.
Make the motion.
Support?
And we discussed this at length on Tuesday. I think this would be beneficial to the township overall. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Lane?
You mentioned that it would be advantageous for the township, but I think the other thing we're doing is building a good relationship with Holly Township because we are expanding their tax base. It also helps our DPW, but Holly Township will have a lot of benefit from this development.
Absolutely.
I-
And
Mr.
we
Chair-
already have an agreement with them, so, Mr. Massey?
Chair, I think Mr. Porter may want to speak to that, because at the last meeting, he indicated that in the long run, this would help with the burden of the water rates.
Right.
Yes.
I think, what Mr. Potter was stating on Tuesday was that, the economy of scale that we gained by adding them as customers will only help us. So I wouldn't print in the paper that the water rates are going to drop after we do this, but it will help provide some economy of scale with any customers that we add to the service.
I think he actually said that the rates wouldn't increase as fast.
As much, yeah.
Right.
It was a qualifying term.
Yes, I like that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
I
Massey.
have to make an acknowledgement. I always pronounce his last name incorrectly.
Okay,
Mr. Potter.
okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to item D. The board will consider a resolution to approve inclusion in and support for the Genesee County Parks and Recreation Commission, Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Greenway 5-year plan.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Support?
And our purpose in doing this is one of our projects for those that were at the meeting on Tuesday for our committee of the whole meeting or for the or that are watching online is that we are working on a trail system that we are seeking grant dollars, and one of the items that will help us is to have a cooperative agreement basically with the county parks. We hope to be able to expand this effort in the future by working with the county as well. So, there's a motion that was seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's a roll call vote.
Roll
Okay,
call.
all right, go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Mr. Massey.
Okay.
Myself, Mr. Supervisor.
Yes.
Thank you. It's approved unanimous.
Okay. The board, item E, the board will consider a resolution to support the application for funding from the MDOT Transportation Alternatives Program for construction of the Iron Bell Trail along Perry Road with matching funds provided by MDNR, the Michigan DNR, and Grand Blanc Township.
I make the motion. Or support, either way.
Okay. Mr. Mr. Massey and Mr. Atkins. Any discussion? Again, this is part of the Iron Bell Trail that eventually will run from Belle Isle to Iron Mountain. And it will come right through Grand Blanc, both the township and the city. Okay,
Roll call.
all those, okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Mr. Massey.
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Supervisor.
Yes.
Thank you, unanimous.
Okay, item F, the board will consider a motion to approve the Hartford Insurance Medicare supplemental policy for retirees. We discussed this at length on Tuesday, and our superintendent will be meeting with, if this moves forward, our superintendent will be meeting with retirees that this would affect. And actually, it's an increase in the benefit. However, it actually reduces our costs substantially, that we can put that savings towards the unfunded liabilities to make sure that we can afford to continue providing retiree health care.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there's a motion
Support.
and there's support. Any discussion? I believe the dollar figure was somewhere north of 100,000, 140 to 180. Was it?
140.
$140,000 in the first year, so. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on to our future positioning, we have asked our DPW Director, Jeff Sears, to join us this evening. And one of the topics is our DPW budget. Good evening, Mr. Sears. We appreciate your time, especially since tonight, I understand, is your son's birthday.
Absolutely. Well, he should be in bed by now, so he's not missing anything. So
Okay.
should be in bed, but we all know how that goes.
We were thinking that you'd bring him to the meeting.
I wouldn't. No. No. He's a very energetic 7-year-old, so he wouldn't last very long. That's for sure.
Wish him a happy birthday for us.
I will definitely tell him.
So would you like to, you have a narrative, I don't know, did you want to
I
cover a
do.
few things, Mr. Sears, first?
Yeah. Well, I just want to touch on a few things with you real quick. And then I would like to go through a couple parts of my narrative that are focused on CIP, and then we'll field some questions about the budget and get it all squared away. So I am responsible as the Director of Public Works for the enterprise funds, which is the Water and Sewer Department. I'm responsible for the development and the execution of those budgets by ordinance. I'm also responsible for the Building and Grounds funds and the Department and Public Services Department within the general fund. So those will be gone through at a later date, but I also develop those budgets with the Finance Department and the Superintendent's Office. The Water and Sewer funds are enterprise funds. And just the background on enterprise funds, if you don't already know, it's a governmental fund. It's self-supporting. It's fee-based. We provide a good. So it's run more like a business than the governmental funds are. They are different from the governmental funds, obviously, meaning our budget development is backwards from what the governmental funds are, the general fund. We start with our expenditures and our operations, and we establish what we need for the coming year. And then our revenues have to match what our needs are. We are not allowed to underfund our operations according to Act 399, which is the Safe Drinking Water Act. So it's a little bit different, whereas with taxes, we're more constrained to the inflation rate and how much revenue we can have there. Public Act 2, which is the Uniform Budgeting Code, actually does not say we have to have a budget for enterprise funds. The only budgets you have to have is for general fund and special revenue funds. And there are some governmental bodies out there that don't budget for these. They just say this is how much money we have and this is how much money we're going to spend. So it's not uncommon that we budget for them, obviously. But we do a very good job with it. Each year I survey my employees. We have workshops via our morning meetings to establish what our operational needs are. So they're the boots on the grounds. They see the infrastructure way more than I do. They kind of help me decide what deficiencies we have out there, what needs to be repaired, what kind of maintenance programs we need to put in place, what we can continue and what we can stop. So I try and include staff as much as I possibly can because they're the most important part of our operation, obviously. It then comes back to me and my managerial staff, which is my assistant director and my clerical employees. We kind of weed out some of the requests because obviously we can't always do everything. We have wants and needs. We can't always get all the wants, but we do weed that out quite thoroughly. We start fresh. Our budget starts fresh every year. I don't just copy and paste the numbers from the previous year into the new year because every year is different for us. It's based on the needs of the infrastructure. So what repairs need to be made, what lift station might need more attention to maintenance, what pumps need to be replaced or double checked, even down to snow plowing. What are the weather predictions? How much salt do we think we're going to need in the coming year? How much did we use last year? It's different every year, so we have to start fresh every single year. Obviously, our predictions, they're hard to be real exact, but we do the best we can, for sure. We always budget with the worst case scenario in mind. We don't want to come up short in our operations. We have to be able to anticipate a pump going out. One pump going out at a single lift station can cost $15,000 to $20,000. So we have to anticipate stuff like that happening. Earlier this year, the board approved a pump maintenance program that we're going to be starting. So that's going to help out significantly in the future with how much maintenance those pumps actually are going to need. Hopefully the inspections and the more intense preventative maintenance eliminate the emergency situations that we might have on some occasions. We also figure on purchasing a lot of fuel for our vehicles. The past couple of years have been good years for us because fuel prices are low, but we don't know there's a hurricane coming that could increase the price of fuel considerably. It's all economy driven, so we budget for worst case scenario for all that stuff, even energy costs for heating and cooling in our buildings. Water usage is also estimated on the previous year's usage. So we track our water usage and efficiency monthly, and I keep a very close eye on that. And what I mean by efficiency is our water loss. We're billed for a certain amount of water by Genesee County, and we bill out for a certain amount of water to our residents and our customers. That number does not ever match. I can guarantee you there's no community ever that has a 0% efficiency. That bills exactly what they produce. But we watch it very closely because if that percentage increases, then we need to start looking where we may have some issues. The water usage is estimated based on the trends we're seeing and how much is being used by our customers. The past 3 years, we've seen a decrease in usage. So for 2019, I am budgeting for a decrease in usage. I think last year we had a 5% decrease, and this year so far I'm seeing a 3% decrease. I put it somewhere at 4% for next year on an average. The previous years we've seen a huge increase in usage. It's all based on weather and the economy. When the economy's tight, people cut back. They learn how to consume water. They don't use as much. When the weather's really hot, people water grass more. So it's difficult, but we've done a very good job so far at budgeting for it. Like I said before, once our costs are determined, the revenues are set to fully fund our operations. When I first developed our budget this year, we had $62,000 in surplus funds going to our fund balance. Through a lot of communication between myself, Mr. Potter, and Dennis, we decided to ask for a slight increase. This is due to, like I said before, the the speculation that we're gonna have a decrease in usage next year based on past trends. We have absorbed some rate increases from Genesee County the past couple years. Not last year, but the year before. We absorbed about 40 cents per 100 cubic feet. So eventually we're gonna have to start picking that up. So we feel like now is the time. We have a very large CIP out there, and we'll go over that. I did set that on the dais for you, the water and sewer 6-year CIPs, so that you could see the amount of projects that we have ahead of us. I don't want you to be concerned about that. That is the projects we have identified that could be triggered in the future. That doesn't mean all these projects are going to be built in the next 2, 3, or 4 years. It could be a decade, it could be 2 decades before they're going to be built. But we do have about, I believe, almost $5 million in CIP this year. We have about $4.5 million in cash that's available for capital improvement this year. Increasing the rates now is going to continue down a road of sustainability for our department. We have to continue to be able to put money away so that we can continue to do the enhanced maintenance and the capital improvement projects. In my budget narrative, I listed, there's quite a bit of information in there, but I listed some of the CIP projects that we want to accomplish this year. We have a couple different ways of doing this. One is enhanced maintenance. Enhanced maintenance is built into the rates. That's an operational item. Those are larger projects that we're going to do, but they're not necessarily coming out of a capital improvement fund. We're going to spend approximately $75,000 at our Knollwood well house repairing concrete that has sunk and that is hollowed out underneath it. What we have there is we run our well houses every month to take samples, and over time we've had some erosion underneath the concrete from the water spillage. So we have to make improvements at our Knollwood well house. That's in Concord Green, right across the street, if you're familiar with it at all. We have $65,000 allocated to our Embury Booster Station. That's for pump rehabilitation. Our Embury Booster Station supplies water to the southern part of our township. It's actually the southwest corner, and it fills our Holly Tower. We have 3 large pumps in that station, and we're looking to rehabilitate 1 a year. Plus, we have some valve repairs that we need to make in that station. We also have, we would like to install a bulk filling station for bulk users. This could be landscape people. It could be construction companies that need it for asphalting, hydro seeders, so on and so forth. The reason we want to do this is to eliminate theft. We have a lot of occurrences where we catch contractors filling their equipment off of a hydrant. Our police department is very vigilant in this, and we do catch a lot of them. And we're hoping that if we make it easier for them so that they don't have to come into the office, it doesn't have to be between 3 o'clock or 7 o'clock and 3 o'clock when we have staff here, that they'll be more encouraged to actually do it the right way and buy the water. The water actually is not that expensive, and it's probably far less than court fines and court costs. But we have been prosecuting quite a few people this year who we catch stealing water.
Slane?
Does that include, Mr. Sears, water pools, people that fill
Absolutely.
people's pools?
It
and
would be
things like
available
that?
to them also. The county does have bulk filling stations that I believe the pool companies use, but we would also like to investigate doing that, once again, to eliminate theft and to gain those revenues. That's also part of our water loss. This month we have about 7% water loss, which is actually very good in the state of Michigan. Most communities see between 10 and 15%, but a lot of that is theft. So we're hoping with the bulk filling station we can eliminate quite a bit of that.
Yeah. Let's let Mr. Sears go through his report and then.
All right, fine, thank you.
Also in our enhanced maintenance schedule, which is also included in your budget packet, by the way, is improvements to our SCADA system in a joint effort with the Genesee County Drain Commission. The SCADA system, supervisory control acquisition data, or data acquisition, allows us, it's our eyes of our water infrastructure. All of our lift stations, all of our water stations, water towers are all monitored through there, and they all talk to each other through there. If you're ever through the office during the day, you might see in my office I have a TV on my wall that has the SCADA system on it. And I watch it constantly. Even when I'm at home, I have my laptop open and I watch it constantly. Just because that's what I'm trained to do. It's always weighing on my mind. Even though it's fully automated, it's just, I don't know, maybe I'm a water and sewer nerd, but I just love it. So we pay very close attention to it. What we want to do is make improvements in, like I said, conjunction with the Drain Commission, so that we can see each other's information more clear. Right now, I can see a portion of the Drain Commission's information from their Center Road stations and their Fenton Road booster station, but the data that comes to us may not be 100% accurate because it goes through different systems and it has to go through multiple points before it gets to us or gets to them. We also cannot see any data from their Fenton Road booster station, even though that communicates, that station is solely to provide Grand Blanc Township with water. And it communicates with our towers, but I cannot see any of that data. I cannot see when their pumps are running. I cannot see what kind of flow they have or what kind of pressures are coming out of there. With this improvement, we will be able to better understand what's going on out in our infrastructure, make adjustments as needed, and just have a little bit of peace of mind that everything is working like it should. So that it would be done in conjunction with, like I said, the Drain Commission. We've already met with them once on it, and we're hoping to meet with them again very early in the year so we can get this going. In our sewer department, we always have our trenchless sewer repair program, which you might be familiar with. It's the Liquiforce trucks that you see out on the road. They go through and they put liners and they seal leaky joints in our sewer system so that we don't have to dig them up. It reinforces the structural integrity, and because of this program, we've been through the township one time completely now, and we put in liners. Now we're going through and we're sealing joints with grout. So because of this program, we have a sewer system that is approaching 60 to 70 years old, some of it, that is in very good condition. That's not going to need major pipe rehabilitation or replacement in coming years like other communities are seeing. So the foresight of the management staff before me, I can't take credit for it because I inherited this program, was excellent, because this puts us above the bar, for sure. Now, on our CIP projects in 2019 for our sewer department, we are going to be looking at the replacement and upsizing of our District 8 sanitary sewer interceptor. This interceptor runs on the west side of town, near the Genesis campus. It goes along Cook Road to McWayne Road, and then it'll run along the new Dort Highway extension. It's a capacity-driven project. We've been pretty much at capacity in the sewer for a while, but we haven't had any development. So we haven't had the need to replace it. Now with Genesis talking very seriously about developing their outlots and the expansion of their assisted living area, capacity will be an issue. And with Dort Highway going in now's the time to do it so that we're not going through that area and tearing it up after the fact. So we want to get ahead of Dort Highway. Dort Highway is going to be built next year also. We're hoping to do the projects in conjunction with each other. We're actually hoping that we can bid them out together if the road commission allows it. And it'll accomplish a couple different things for us. It's a couple different goals. This project's been shelf ready for quite some time. So it'll be good to see that done. Also that I realized today that I excluded from here is we have some water looping projects that were actually approved for last year that we were not able to complete last year because I could not obtain the easements that I needed. I've worked very hard with these people, and now I have all the easements with the assistance of some of the very men that were here that are on the DDA board now. I have all the easements we need, so we'll be able to move forward with those water looping projects. Those are included in the budget for this year, or for next year. We also have our vehicle replacement plan, which I believe I included in your budget packets. This year, we have on schedule to replace 2 pickup trucks and 1 large dump truck for plowing and salting the roads. On those vehicles, we have a 10-year replacement plan for pickup trucks, and on the dump trucks, we have a 15-year replacement plan. That's an industry standard that nobody's really ever been able to meet. It's been recommended by the AWWA, and basically what that does is it eliminates maintenance down the road. Our mechanics will be the first one to tell you a pickup truck that plows 10 years is too long for it anyways. But it's going to have to be just right for us, because we can't replace 5-year-old trucks. But 10 years is the magic number for us. Last year we caught up with it. We replaced our last truck that was, I believe, 12 years old. So we're caught up now. We're on our 10-year schedule. And continuing to make the investments in the new vehicle will lower those maintenance costs in the future. The dump trucks, like I said, they're on a 15-year schedule. This truck, replacing this one, brings us up to that 15-year mark now. It's a 2003 International dump truck, so we're there. Also, we have Playland in our CIP. I have $350,000 programmed for that. That's to be allocated towards demolition, which actually may occur sooner than 2019. My goal is to have those buildings down by winter. But once again, that's a constant worry for me. We have to check those buildings weekly. We have to make sure the sump pumps are running. We've had break-ins in them. We have kids playing in them. So we're really hoping to get them tore down, and hopefully we can get the site cleared early next year, if not by the end of this year. And then there's money in there also to do some costs or some needs assessments for the DPW, and to further plan out that property in our campus plan. It's already been in there once, and I've been working with Mr. Potter and the architect that did the campus plan previously, and we're going to meet shortly to go over that and see what we had in mind for that property previously. We've had our eye on Playland for quite some time. It's just never quite the price that we got it for. So, staffing for 2019, I expect will remain the same. I do have 1 vacant technician budgeted because we do have some retirements coming up. I have found out recently that I do have 1 employee who is planning to retire recently, or very soon. It's hard to replace somebody right when they retire. It doesn't give me much overlap to train. In the DPW, I have the unfortunate problem where most of my technicians have been with the township between 12 and 19 years. For 10 people, that's a very close grouping. And we're going to have to keep a close eye on that so that we can replace staff and get them trained before we actually lose the most senior people and lose that knowledge and history of the township. With that, I would love to field any questions you have on the budget. Hopefully I was thorough enough and gave you kind of an understanding of how I come up with my figures.
Ms. Lane, you had a question earlier?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. When you're doing the loss of water, that does include water used for fires and anything that the fire department needs?
It does not. I do not have a way of monitoring the fire department. Their trucks don't have meters. They don't carry meters with them. When there's a fire, they don't have time to meter the water. Most of the time, they fill their trucks right here at the stations. I don't think it's a real frequent occasion, and Chief Burdett could probably elaborate on that they fill from hydrants. But we do not monitor that currently.
So just to go along with that question, so if they're putting out a fire and there's a hydrant there, they connect the hose to the hydrant, that comes out of what Ms. Lane is saying is our loss of
Correct.
Water. So that 7%, maybe we had a big fire or something.
It very well could be. Our efficiency is so good that I can tell you just by looking at it, when we've had a water main break.
Okay.
Those cause a huge dip, and even depending on how fast it's caught. We have some water mains that are in rural areas that we've seen them where we know they've been running for days, and you just don't see them because they're off the edge of the road, or they're out in a field or something. But one of my staff members here reads the meters very often every day, and she catches it quickly. So, and our FlexNet system is the thing for that. If we could not read the meters remotely, then we wouldn't be able to catch it like we do now, and we wouldn't be able to track efficiency like we do now.
Right. Mr. Thomas?
Director Sears, with the new NDEQ laws coming out with, going from the 15 parts per million to the 12 parts per million from this summer, and the legislature changing that and making every municipality in charge of changing everyone's lead lines. So, like, every municipality.
Right.
I didn't see that in your CIP.
That's because we're very fortunate we do not have lead in our system.
With going from
With
the,
our service lines, we do not have
going
lead
to
service
the
lines.
houses?
That is correct. We are 100% copper. We have areas that we were suspicious of, old private well systems that we took over, and we have verified most of those services that they are all copper. This should not affect our cost. I actually had a meeting today with the DEQ and the Drain Commission to go over some of the rules, and it's kind of unclear on what we're going to be required to do to verify that in the future. Hopefully we don't have to go verify every single house. We know because of our specifications, our inspections, and just the vast knowledge I have here in my employees that there's never been a lead service that's went in the ground since Grand Blanc Township has had the water supply here.
So the key will be, as Mr. Sears says, because I have been in on, not this meeting that Mr. Sears speaks of, but others, but the detail will, the devil, obviously is in the detail of whether they will, what they will accept as proof that we know that
Correct.
those lines are not lead.
And they're
Some-
still determining
yeah.
that. And they told us today, they still don't know what they're gonna accept for that. Preliminary, we have to have a inventory to them by January 1st, 2020. The preliminary inventory can say, this is what our records indicate. This is what our specifications have been since we've been a water supply. And this is what all of our construction contracts say was required for them to put in. Our inspections indicated it was installed that way, so we know by that route that there is no lead in the system.
So when we became a water supply, when was that? 80s, 90s?
That would have been in the,
1980.
I'm sorry, what was that,
It was
Ms. Lane?
1980 with Stockbridge Commons. We ran the first line down Hill Road, and that was the
There you
first
have it.
subdivision that was required to have the water lines installed at the time they constructed. Up until
Before,
that time, we had,
before that, we did have the
wells.
community wells that we had, but.
but that was
that
for
wasn't-
Knollwood.
Okay,
That was community
was-
well?
yeah, so.
Let's have one at a time here.
Since 1980, we know that lead service lines were not installed. The only lead threat that we have in our system are the homes that were built before the lead ban, because they have copper piping with lead solder. And that is on the homeowner side of it. That's
Yep.
not on the township side of it.
Ms. Lane?
The Knollwood well was put in to serve Knollwood Apartments when Dominic Masseri was the developer. And then it was used later on, and we put a second well in there in 1999 in order to supply municipal water to people on water lines in the township in the event something would happen. But our
Okay.
sanitary sewer went in for the first time in 1971.
But that has nothing to do with the MDEQ new law that started in June. A lot of the municipalities in the county are, trying to,
Oh, they're struggling, because
they're
they,
struggling hard.
especially some of the cities that have not adjusted their rates over time to build up their CIPs and replace pipe, do not have the resources to replace the lead lines, much less the lines on the private side going into the homes, which is an even larger expense.
The report that I read, though, is with the solder, the lead solder, that won't get you to 12
No.
parts per million. You're still well
It
below
can,
12.
it can. We did have one home in our summer monitoring that was over the 12 parts per million. We tracked it down, we worked with them, we tracked it down to a kitchen faucet. They replaced the kitchen faucet, and it was, they're back down to 0 parts per million.
Great
Mr.
job
Massey?
on tracking that.
Mr. Chair.
Great job, Jeff.
Thank you.
Director Sears.
Director
Great job.
Sears, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How do we purchase water?
We have master meters. So along Maple Road and Fenton Road, we have 6 master meters, maybe more than that. And those master meters monitor the amount of water that comes through from Genesee County into Grand Blanc Township. Genesee County reads those meters, and they send us the reads every single day. So they determine how much water we're using, and they just replaced all of those meters this past spring. And then we bill through our own meters, obviously.
But is it true that we are responsible for X number of gallons of water regardless whether we use it or not?
No. No, we pay for the water we use. We have ready-to-serve charges through Genesee County, and that's based on our peak month of water usage. So,
Which every home has
Right.
as well.
right now, our ready-to-serve charge is $912,000 for the year from Genesee County. And the ready-to-serve charge is there
What is
to
it?
protect them.
900 what?
The ready-to-serve charge is there to protect them in case water usage drops off. They still have to be able to provide us with water. They still have to be able to operate their water system, just like we still have to be able to service all of our customers, regardless of how much water is being used. That's why we have the ready-to-serve charge. If you are connected to water and you can turn your faucet on, you're gonna pay that, because even if you don't use any water, I still have to be able to provide you with water and pay for the maintenance of the water system. Just because people stop using water doesn't mean I can shut lines off and not fix water main breaks. It prepares us for a loss of usage. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Thomas was talking about with regard to the copper and lead and what have you. I think, one of the things that you see around the state, even in Macomb County with the huge sewer issue that they had, I don't think people quite understand the value of having the infrastructure that we do in Grand Blanc Township in terms of how up-to-date things are, because, as Mr. Thomas mentioned, there's municipalities that are really
They're hurting.
pulling their hair out,
hurting.
trying to figure out how they're going to afford to pay for meeting it's,
They're gonna go bankrupt.
the legislature has acted so that, we don't have lead in the water,
Sure.
but a lot of these municipalities, like you say, haven't been building into the infrastructure for the day when somebody held them accountable to these levels. And fortunately, our forefathers and foremothers have sought to make sure that our infrastructure was invested in to the point where we aren't going to hopefully have any of those issues.
I came here from a municipality that was like that. And I tell people every day that I see them, we're very fortunate for what we have here.
And I think, one of the things as we're looking at further development that as a township board and even, our economic development is being able to sell that to, and somehow use that for marketing
Absolutely.
ourselves, because as the
We
DDA
should.
even, one of the things, if you're looking at building for example, we're doing this run down to Holly to the buildings off Dixie Highway. They need water and sewer, and they aren't
Absolutely.
the only ones. There's businesses looking, Magna. So it's a big deal for development that we have
is.
this infrastructure in the ground, and somehow we need to let that be known. But Ms. Lane had her hand up.
Well, that was, again, as you mentioned, it was for the first boards that were here in 1970 when they decided, when we were a lot smaller in population, to bond to put the sewers in the line, so, in the ground. The only problem they did is when they put the sanitary sewer lines in initially, they put them in the roads, and that's why we have problems with some of our roads not holding up well.
In the subdivisions.
In the
I just want to make
subdivisions.
sure that's clear, that we aren't
Right.
saying they're in the main roads.
And then technology caught up and they started putting them in
Yeah.
the yards, but it was the people, the first people that came here that decided to do that, so.
Yeah, it's some great foresight. Mr. Massey?
Yes, I have two questions.
Sure.
My first question is ready-to-serve charge.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me the ready-for-service charge, does that increase every year?
No, no, sir. It did increase last year because we received a substantial increase from Genesee County. So if you recall, last year, the board approved a rate restructuring with our ready-to-serve charge. It was $11.50 per meter, no matter what. We instituted a meter equivalent system, so those who have larger meters pay more because they have a higher demand on the system. They have a larger need for water, and so if somebody has a 6-inch meter, they're paying, I don't remember, 600 and some odd dollars a month, whereas somebody who has a 3/4 inch meter is paying, I believe, like $12.25 a month.
So, Mr. Sears, are you saying that the ready-to-service charge will not increase?
It is not proposed to increase this year, no, sir.
Oh, it could increase in the future?
I'm not telling you that it will never increase.
But it's something that the county might pass on
I'm
to
not
us.
telling you, and that's another unknown. We don't know what kind of rate increase we'll be looking at from Genesee County. We don't get that until June or July.
Okay, my second question.
Mr. Massey, let me just on that ready-to-serve charge, if I can give an example, that, and Mr. Sears, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of that ready-to-serve charge is, let's take a Walmart, for example. I don't know how big of a line they have coming in there, but I would imagine it's a pretty big,
Yeah, it's sizable.
it's sizable.
I couldn't tell you exact.
Right, but, if it's 12 inches, what have you, it's a lot, and you probably have a 2-inch or 1.5
1
coming
inch,
into your
yeah.
house. So anyways, the water that we have to have on hand, ready to serve them in case of a fire or what have you, is fairly substantial, as opposed to the amount of water that we need to have if you turn on all your faucets.
Correct.
So even though Walmart probably isn't a huge user of water, we have to have the water ready. So that's where the ready to serve comes from. Ready to, if they open up all their valves and their Ansel system goes off to
Right.
put out a fire, we have to have the water ready. Same with General Motors with their warehouse. We have to have some huge water lines headed that direction that cost us money to maintain.
Correct.
Plus all the water on hand to be able to service that. We don't want the fire alarm to go off and, oops, we don't have enough water to supply you. So that's where that ready to serve, why it would be more expensive for us for a larger customer or a larger, line going in there, would you say? or-
Right, meter, it's
Meter.
based on meter size, correct.
So.
It's a great
that-
explanation.
So anyways, that's kind of how I understood it, but,
That's correct.
so I don't know if that helps at all, but, Mr. Massey, your other question?
Yeah, my second question is, so the water rates that we receive and increase the residents, that's separate from ready-to-serve?
From the ready to serve. Well, my proposal is to increase the commodity rate. The commodity rate is what you pay per 100 cubic feet of water. So it's based on your usage, it's not on the flat rate. And I believe I proposed a 15-cent increase.
So let me ask you a question to make sure I understand this correctly from a financial point of view. So could I fairly say that I could have 2 increases in 1 year? A
I-
ready-to-serve and a water rate increase?
I can't tell you no, because we don't know what's gonna happen in any given year. Genesee County could send us a letter in 6 months and say, we're doubling your water rates. That wouldn't happen, but we don't know. I'm not gonna tell you no, that can't happen. But as of right now, this is the only rate increase I foresee this year. It's 15 cents per 100 cubic feet.
Mr. Kuzak?
Yeah, we did have a couple increases where the county increased it and we increased it within
Correct.
in the same year, right?
Absolutely. And
And
that
there was
has
one time
happened.
that the county bumped it 2 or 3 times within 1 year.
Yes, that
And
has
we
happened.
had no control over it, right?
Correct.
And as you stated earlier, Mr. Sears, we've absorbed some of those increases that we've received from the
did.
county, and
Yep.
we didn't increase
As
it.
recent as 2016, we absorbed an increase.
So we have done that so that we didn't have to increase it to our customers each time, but there's only so many of those we can absorb without having to increase ourselves. But
Correct.
from sitting on the KWA board, the whole idea behind the KWA is to reduce the number of increases and the amount of increase we have to. So the KWA board and the Drain Commission are not looking to, I mean, I think they probably set their budget the same way. That I haven't been through a full year yet, but I
Sure.
believe that they base it on what their costs are. They aren't in it to make money.
That's true.
Mr. Guzak, did you have your hand? Mr. Thomas?
I just wanted to personally thank you and Mr. Potter for doing your due diligence and your leadership on this lead line and keeping track of this.
Thank you.
I mean, thank you, Mr. Potter, fraternity brother.
We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us. I'll talk to him about that later on, but it's been nerve-wracking so far.
Yeah,
We're in a good spot, though. Our township is in a good spot.
Very impressed, thank you.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Sears, a few years ago, Plant Moran developed their computer system, and I don't think any of the board members were here when we initiated it. Could you explain?
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, Earl, I forgot you were
Earl
there
was
with
here.
And actually, I'm familiar with it from, we've had some legal dealings with it that I'm familiar with it as well.
Plant Moran built for us a rate study model. It's a rate model, I don't know how to put this politely, that's not really usable by myself, who is not an accountant. And it's very complicated. Our own finance director, who we all know is very good at what she does, personally says it's not usable. It's very complicated to run. One of our goals for 2019 is to identify a utility consultant company, which we already have a couple of them, that will build us a rate model that we can use year after year that anybody can use, not just an accountant, because we have accountants on staff.
Right.
But something that complicated is just not feasible for even myself to use.
Mr. Guzak?
Does Kathy work with you on this?
She does, yes.
'Cause I
Kathy,
talked to her today and she says you do it all.
I do it, but Kathy reviews everything I do for the rates. Between her and Dennis, we all work together to build it.
Yeah, because the whole purpose of it was, when we instituted that study, is they were throwing darts basically on how much we needed. We were trying to-
Absolutely.
we're just trying to reacting, so we went out and had them do that. And
Right.
of course, that's what's been driving all our rate increases since that point in time.
Right, well, the past couple of years, Kathy and I have tried to work it out, and we haven't been able to get it to work.
Did you bring Plant Moran back?
We've brought them in, and they've explained it to us, but it just doesn't work for us. So developing something that's usable by township staff such as myself is key to doing like what you said, being able to budget for multiple years and predict our usage and our rates for multiple years ahead.
Yeah, because they built that for more than just the township. They had it for a lot of different townships.
No, I
And they
agree.
copyrighted it.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Things change and things improve,
How
so.
long ago did we pay for this formula?
It was
About
before I
about 3
came
years
here, and
ago,
I've been
3 or
here
4
for,
years ago.
Oh, it was
I've
longer
been
than
here
that.
for about 5 years, so it's been about 6 or
It
7
would
years
have
ago.
been in 2010
So what
or
was
11.
what was your point you were bringing up? About this, Kathy?
I
Or
thought it
Clerk
was
Lane?
important for us to know that we had
Right, we
gone
got one
through a
now.
rate study and Plant Moran came in, and they were the only ones that could do it. And at that time, it was working, and they came in
So,
whenever we needed help, in order to say, the program, as it was explained for us, is if you were going to do any major capital improvements, you could put it in this system,
Right.
and it would tell you what the payback time would be, what the rates would have to be.
Right.
You could adjust it for something else, because you could say, well, we don't want to put out those kind of rates. It was a very usable system when we
sure,
took it on,
Yeah, 'cause-
and this is the first I've ever heard that there was a problem with it. The Plant Moran couldn't correct for us.
Well, we don't pay them to run it. If we paid Plant Moran to come in and develop our DPW budget and run the model, it might be a different story.
How much did
Yeah,
you
but
say
they
it was?
told us.
Let's stay in order here, but,
112?
Mr. Potter, do you have any input on this? You've been with this, with the township for a number of years, but, one of the things that we have to do is keep up to date, and I mean,
And we're
because
doing
we
that.
developed this 6 years ago,
One
we used
thing
to
that
use,
the rate study and model did is that it brought us up into the times where we were. Now we are able to keep up, because before we were way behind. As little as 8 years ago, our DPW was in the red. We did not have cash on hand to do CIP work. We were in trouble. So we brought Plant Moran in, and I say we, I was not here at that time,
Yeah.
to help us with that problem. And
Well,
it brought us up to where we needed to be.
I'm not an expert in water usage or in coming up with these formulas, and I don't think any of our board members are either. And I think, we just heard Mr. Thomas praise you and Mr. Potter for your work on this and your foresight. I'm not going to take a step back and question why we're looking at improving our rate study. I think it's admirable that you're proposing that we take another look at it.
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to do is get behind the 8 ball with regard to our water rates and making sure that we can afford our capital improvements.
Sure.
And I mean, just because you're looking at it doesn't mean we're going to change it, but I applaud you for being forward-thinking and looking at it and saying, hey, this thing could work better, I think. And, I'm sure you'll look at other municipalities and what they
Absolutely.
have and compare what we have. But just because we did it 6 years ago doesn't mean we stay with it for the next 15.
Absolutely.
We'll show them, we'll make it work.
So, Mr. Mansour,
Can I do a little lightning round here?
do a little what, I'm sorry?
A little lightning round?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Huh?
sure.
Been waiting.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Sears.
Yes.
So the 15 cents per 100 cubic foot increase would be a how much increase?
Um,
Percent?
how much increase in rates?
Yeah.
For 15 cents per 100 cubic feet, it generates for us, I have it written down here, it generates for us this year, $153,000.40.
Okay. From a year-over-year standpoint, are you expecting the volume of water usage to change, or is it forecasted in the budget here?
It's forecasted to decrease.
Okay.
Decrease.
Why
So-
decrease, Mr. Sears?
Because the trend over the past 2 years, we lost 3% in 2017, and this year I'm on track to lose about 5% in usage.
Even
So I
though our-
averaged it to 4%.
Even though our population and everything's going up?
That is correct.
Interesting.
And it could be, people have gotten wise. We had Grand Reserve that uses a ton of water on irrigation. It could be that they've made that more efficient.
The first two items under your capital request here, the $75,000 for the enhanced maintenance and the, it's the Embry and the other, and the Knollwood.
Mhm.
Those would be new projects,
Correct.
and not, so when we talk about a year-over-year capital budget change, I mean, some projects are going to get completed, and then we balance them out with new ones.
Correct.
What's the overall change that you expect?
This is, it's actually, there is no change from year to year, and this is an enhanced maintenance plan. So in the back of your budgets, you should have an enhanced maintenance plan. And that amount of money generally stays about the same from year to year. It hasn't fluctuated very much based on the needs of our water and sewer stations.
For the water filling station, the one that you're proposing here, how many users or how much volume would you expect to get from that?
I'm not certain at this point. Users, I think that we will have quite a bit, but I don't have any kind of estimated numbers for you.
And where would this be located?
It would be located here on our campus, more than likely on our service drive.
So let me see, the enhanced maintenance, again, 2019 budget, it mentions in your narrative it goes from $175,000 to $300,000, but it says for the second year in a row.
Correct.
So we budgeted $300,000 last year, and we're
Correct.
carrying it over, okay.
Yep, this year was 300,000, next year will be 300,000. And that's because we're into grouting now, and grouting is more expensive to complete than liners.
In the capital improvements for 2019, $2.4 million, well paid out of the fund balance. So, that's that like a replacement every year?
That's using our cash reserves.
Okay, but that's kind of a planned,
Correct.
last year is how much?
Last year was actually the same, but we didn't complete the project.
All right. Let me see, okay, the last one, for the Playland demolition piece, just $300,000, kind of sounds like a lot of money. What is the scope of, it would be entailed in that?
We're actually, well, the scope of that project is to demolish all of the buildings and level the site. That's, we're not gonna keep the putt-putt course, I don't want anybody to be disappointed. The go-kart track's gonna go, everything. And it's also moving the pond that's there. The existing pond is right in the middle of any kind of building footprint that we might need in the future.
What do you mean by move a pond?
We can actually fill that pond in and move it to the other side of the property by digging out another part.
Which is a
It may be-
wetland or wet area anyways.
It may be that we don't even need that pond.
Okay,
Right now, it's labeled as a wetland by the
Sure.
DEQ or some other national firm. We don't believe that it is a wetland because it's man-made. It's definitely not a pristine wetland. So we feel like we can probably fill that in without replacing it. Obviously, that has to be approved.
okay. Going into the budget summary, capital fees, 2016 $1 million, $17 million, adopted 2018 $500,000, 840 this year. You're proposing $500,000. What's the, we've kind of generally been double that. What's the thought process
Well,
there?
we don't really have a good way to predict this because we don't know what kind of projects are gonna come forward. So far, we don't have anything in the oven for next year. We do know of Shannon Fasteners, obviously, that is gonna more than likely be built. But we don't know what other kind of development's going to come into the township next year. So we've budgeted $500,000 across the board because we do know we're gonna have some income. The past few years, we've had grand reserve, which has been a lot of capital income. We don't have that for next year. They have 15 houses and they're done. Pulte's getting ready to pull out of that subdivision.
And across the street, we approved,
They've sold that. They're not gonna build that now. I think that there may have been another developer that came in that is considering building on that site, but I cannot count on that income because I don't know if it's good. There's a lot of projects that come to the township. They say they're gonna build here and then they back out.
is part of what's included in that capital fee the water tap-in?
That is the water tap in, yeah.
Okay, so that's the whole thing where we're, in this
Yeah.
other page, it looks like we're down to $250,000 for that. So there must be others included in there, right?
Right, the water tap in fee is the capital fee, I apologize. So it's $250,000 that we're budgeting for 19.
Okay.
There's 215 that we budgeted for.
And that can change fairly quickly, that number, right?
It absolutely
If
could,
you
and it
gotta-
may. And what you have to realize is that the capital fee income does not go into our operating budget. That goes right to our cash position.
Okay.
It goes into our capital fund, because we cannot use that for operations. It has to go right back into supporting our CIP projects.
But we have plenty, of which we
Correct.
have plenty.
Correct,
So a 200-seat restaurant could be $100,000.
absolutely,
Positive on that.
absolutely.
So advancing into the DPW sewer revenue part of this, you showed a $70,000 increase in the expected penalties for delinquent sewer. So you've been pretty conservative in all the rest of your other things. What
We
makes you
have
think?
been, because in the past, we waived penalties a lot. We don't do that anymore. We do not waive penalties very often anymore. So we've seen that revenue spike quite a bit. And the reason we don't waive them anymore is because our ordinance doesn't allow us to.
So if we had not waived penalties, you think we would be in this range this year?
Probably, yeah. Right now, our current activity is, well, as of, well, I can tell you what it is right now, but it's higher than that. So,
It looks like we're about $80,000 so far
yeah,
this year,
as
so
of August 31st,
about
it was
130, I
$80,000. Right now, it's at $112,000.
okay. And
So-
that's with some waiving earlier in the year.
That's with some waiving, yes,
Okay, and just a couple more if you'll.
absolutely.
Let me go here. So into the appropriations, existing users expense. So down near the bottom, capital outlay.
I'm sorry, Al, for which department?
Let me see.
Administrative, water, sewer?
Department, Department 536.
Okay, that's water, okay.
Yep, water. So down toward the bottom here, we have a capital outlay that has been running at, I guess $70,000, $80,000. We're up to $1.3 million.
Correct.
There's, what particular projects?
That is our water looping projects that are
Okay.
in there.
All right,
So there's a transfer a revenue from cash, from our fund balance, and this is the expenditure out.
so the net for this is, well, we still fund it,
Correct, we fund it out of cash.
but out of the sinking fund or a.
Correct, our fund balance.
Fund balance, okay. Yeah, I guess the only other question that I have is in the capital improvement plans here that you have both the water and the sanitary sewer. First, for the sanitary sewer one, how much of which one of these is Genesis related?
That would be District 8, project number 2. That's
District-
the one that we're gonna build this year.
District?
District 8 is project number 2.
Oh,
under
part
the-
2 or 2A, got it, okay, fine.
Right.
All right, and then, in general for these, how are these projects generated and prioritized?
So this capital improvement plan has been in place for quite a long time, since before I've been here. These are all, most of these are been identified at capacity, for capacity issues. So Mr. Potter keeps a very close eye on our capacity in our system. And we only bought a certain amount of capacity from Genesee County. We're only allowed a certain amount. And our pipes only allow a certain amount. So every time we add users, we calculate that through what we call REUs, residential equivalency units. We're only allowed a certain amount of REUs in our sewer system. So as we get closer to that capacity, we identify the projects where if we see future development.
Like bottlenecks, you want to solve those?
Correct. A big one that's on here is project number 1, District 1611 upgrade. As you can see, that's a $10 million project. That's a huge interceptor.
Where is that?
Yeah,
Mr.
where is
Sears?
that?
That is actually over along Baldwin Road, on the east side of town, southeast end of the township. And that is a huge project. That right now is at capacity, but we have included this Grand Reserve South, which we mentioned before, which Pulte pulled out of, but we have another developer. We have also included a portion of Tech Village in here. So in that system, we already have some capacity planned out for future development. These projects are based on development. There's not a whole lot of expansion of our system in here.
Okay.
And
And how
there
do
is a
they-
developer looking at that Pulte.
Yeah.
area.
So for both of these, the prioritization of these is kind of like, and these are projects 1, 2, 3, 4, that's how we would go after them?
It's not necessarily prioritized like that. It's prioritized based on capacity. Whenever our capacity needs trigger the project, that's when we have to do it. So if another manufacturing company comes in and I don't have a big enough water main to supply them, I really don't want to turn away a manufacturing company and tell them, sorry, Grand Blanc Township is closed for business because we don't have a big enough water main.
So you would sub a different one in for one of these, is
Absolutely.
what you're saying?
Year by year, we look at it, and that's what it's based on. These are just the projects we have identified that are getting close to being needed.
Got it.
And like I said earlier, Al, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years down the road.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Atkins?
Okay, I have a few as well. So,
You've got 3 minutes. No.
okay, just too quick.
That's public comment.
Sorry I
Yeah.
used your time.
You mentioned to one of Mr. Mansour's questions that the increase in the rate of 15 cents per 100 cubic feet would equate to 153,000 this year, assuming this would be adopted.
This year, correct.
What would it be for a full calendar year? What's your?
That's a full calendar year for all of 2019. I've based it on my predictions for what our usage is going to be in 2019. We could use more water, we could use less water, but I don't have a crystal ball. So that is based on what I've seen in the past and what I believe is going to happen next year.
And how many cubic feet does the average homeowner use?
2,000 cubic feet. I think.
Per year?
No, per quarter, I'm
per
sorry.
quarter.
Quarter, we bill quarterly. And so the average home, my house, with my family of four, I'm usually right around 1,800 cubic feet. And I think that this increase is going to affect a family by $15 to $20 a quarter, is what I've
quarter.
estimated, yeah.
Okay, and then, a couple line item budget areas here. So on, Fund 592, I guess this is the DPW page. For workman's comp, I see the cost, so if you go back to 2016, you know, you're a little over 32,000, then 27,000, 21. But then the budget for 2019 is 8,219, which is good, it's going in the right direction, but is there some, maybe there were some open cases that are closed, or is that?
I think that we've probably over budgeted for that in previous years.
Okay.
And yes, we have had some, I'm blessed not to have very many cases in my department. So this is based on an actual estimate given to me by the finance department that it's an actuarial, from what I've been told, from our insurance company. That's an estimate.
So the cost went down, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
I'm not
our
looking at
budget amount went down. Last year, we had budgeted $40,000. Our current activity is $21,000.
Well, Mr. Limita also looked into the work comp and saved us some
Right.
money there too.
We've switched carriers also.
Okay. And then for legal fees, what makes up the legal fees out of your department?
Mr. Laddie. Basically, my involvement with Mr. Laddie, I consult with him quite a bit, actually. But anytime, like I said earlier, recently, we've had to prosecute quite a few people for water theft. We've had a court case recently trying to recover some inspection fees that were never collected. So it's a portion of Mr. Laddie's retainer and then his hourly rate.
Just a note on that. Another example of that would be the Holly, potentially the Holly agreement.
Correct.
For Shannon Fasteners. Another allocation of the attorney fee would include a lot of the DDA work that's been going on as well. Now, I'm split into two portions of a retainer fee. It runs about, I think, 57%, 43%, but it's not quite a 50-50 split, but there's quite a bit of water-related work that runs throughout our monthly work and our monthly retainers.
And
Even-
there's labor counsel in there also.
Even being able to get easements, I believe that
He's helped
takes
us with
Mr.
easements
Lady's
previously
time.
also. He reviews a lot of documents for me,
I mean,
contracts and.
Somebody
so on
doesn't
and
want
so
to give you an easement, there's some legal issues
Just
there.
real quick, a question for Attorney Laddie. But that's retainer fee, there's no hourly fee.
No, that's correct. It's retainer fee.
Oh, well.
And then moving on, when you start to look into the shared administrative expense, superintendent, human resources, finance department, and cashiers, maybe this isn't necessarily a question for you, it may be unfair, maybe it's more of an operational, but are these fees that are just equally divided up between departments, or has there been some time studies put in to figure out who?
Superintendent Limita and Kathy Sostak have spent quite a bit of time studying the actual time spent with my department and everywhere else. The cashiers, obviously, because they collect utility payments. Administrative fees are for Dennis's time, Kathy's time, the whole finance department. I also pay for a good portion of the GIS department because the majority of their work is through the DPW. So they reevaluate that every single year. I don't believe that fee changed for us this year.
Okay.
Or maybe it did.
Mr.
Looks like it
Sears,
did go
did
up.
go up a little bit.
It did
and
go
that's-
up.
one thing that, if I can interject, is that the study that we're having done for the
Correct.
fire department, the cost allocation study, actually, some of the information there will be useful for, I believe, Mr. Limita to be able to see how they
Absolutely.
allocate certain expenses and be able to use that for future budgeting purposes for other departments as well.
Absolutely.
Mr. Atkins?
Just two more here. So for the trucks that you propose to replace, you mentioned, and I agree with you, it's a pretty brutal environment to plow snow with and stuff, and those four-wheel drives and trucks do get quite the abuse. But, so you mentioned that you go more off an amount of time versus an amount of miles.
Correct.
Is there a reason for that?
It's just been noticed by our mechanics, we get about 10 years out of them. They all generally have right around the same mileage when we go to sell them. They're all usually around 50,000 miles when we get there. The trucks are all used in the same fashion by, some of my employees put more miles on them than others. My meter truck puts on more miles. My utility staking truck puts on more miles. But they all generally have the same amount of mileage at the 10-year mark.
50,000 miles in 10 years.
Right around there, correct.
Wow, that's a lot lower than I thought it would be. And then,
Which some of the things, just if I may interject too, that, I mean, our mechanics are very astute in terms of
Absolutely.
making sure that when the costs start to get out of line in terms of us spending more money on repairs.
Oh, they tell me.
I would gladly do them if we want them to do them, but I think what they're looking at is when it makes sense that, you know what, the repairs are starting to outpace what it would.
And we're very fortunate to have a mechanic here who's been here for 25 years. So he's seen,
Steve?
Steve has seen these trucks go through the gamut and how long he can push them. And I trust his opinion and his judgment.
Mr. Massey?
Yes, a note on the trucks.
Yes, sir.
It seems like 10 years is a long time when you're using the truck to plow snow.
Sure.
It seems like you would have a lot of components that are breaking prior to 10 years. So how do you evaluate that
Again,
cost
from
analysis?
our observation, 10 years about that breaking point where we're going to start seeing transmissions, front ends and stuff like that. So at the 10-year mark is where we know we should probably start looking at replacement before we get into those larger issues.
Is that because the transmission is under warranty for about 50,000 miles?
No. They're far out of warranty by the time we get to that point.
Okay.
It's usually about 3 years.
Okay.
But the constant forward and backwards with plowing is hard on the transmission. With 50,000 miles is probably 100,000 miles on a regular standard duty truck that you're just driving around on a truck that's plowing.
Yeah. Mr. Atkins, you had a couple more?
yeah, two more, but one, just to kind of add something to Mr. Massey's comment. I get a phone call probably every day about buying an extended vehicle warranty. Is that something that you've ever looked into for the major components like the drivetrain, or?
I haven't, and I don't know that they offer them for municipal purchases, but I'm not positive. We could definitely look into that.
Okay.
As I said, we're looking at purchasing new trucks at the beginning of the year, and we could definitely look at that.
I was just curious how that.
It'd be something to look at for sure. I'm sure the
Careful if you
mechanics
call
would
them,
love
'cause
that.
they'll call you every day after that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then for the cost study that we're in the midst of right now with the fire, how are you, we talked about the amount of water used from the hydrants.
Correct.
Will this change or add anything to the hydrants? Will you see anything come out of the study as an apparatus to measure that going forward, or how is that?
I think what you will see more so is you won't have anything to measure the amount of water, but you'll have what we call hydrant rental in our business. What we do is we generally charge fire departments rental fees for the maintenance of the hydrants themselves. That's pretty much an industry standard. I don't know that it's ever been discussed here in the township, but with this kind of a study and as in-depth that they're getting, I'm sure that's probably going to come up.
And then last one, so if there was a fire and it was a total loss, say it was a big structure, maybe no one has this answer, but if it's, when the insurance covers that, is there a portion that we receive back in terms of water loss? Can we bill for
No, I don't believe so.
It's just cost of
It's just the cost
providing service.
of our business, yeah, our service.
Okay.
And keep in mind, the residents are paying for that hydrant and that water to be there also through their ready-to-serve charge.
Okay.
So it may not, when you look at the amount of water that's used on such a structure fire, it may not equal out, but I don't think there's any real way of judging it unless you metered every single fire, which when it comes down to time where there's a structure fire, you don't have time to think about metering the water usage.
Okay.
Just as a side question, Chief, do we receive any reimbursement for any fire from insurance?
Now, there are a lot of homeowner policies that have riders to them to cover some fire loss, but we're talking $200-300 when you could have a $40,000-50,000 loss.
Yeah, and a lot of the commercial policies have them too, but we don't collect on those.
No.
Okay.
It's a fee we've never billed for.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Good, thanks.
I have a few questions unless somebody else. You mentioned the cost of salt and that, what have you. I think one of the things, just for our public, you might mention, the separation there between enterprise funds.
Correct.
And, for example, when we salt or plow, that's not coming out of the water fund.
You're absolutely right.
Their fees are paying for water.
And when I was speaking of that, because what you have to understand is that I have to think about all of these things, not just the enterprise funds. So the general fund does pay the water and sewer department for every minute we spend plowing. The general fund pays for every little bit of salt. They have to reimburse us for those services. So when I mention we have to be able to think of how much salt we're using, that's for the capacity of developing the public service budget within the general fund. But yeah, the general fund pays for every little bit of snow plowing.
Right. Let's see. In terms of, staffing, with our police, our fire, what have you, as the township grows, we need to, add. What do you see with the DPW? Are we growing at a rate that will require more staff in the future?
Well, we added one employee this year because we're certainly growing. It really depends on the future on residential developments. Residential developments are a lot to maintain for us. We have more hydrants, more water mains, more meters, but we are growing at a rate where we're going to see the DPW grow in the future. You also have to think about there's always this talk about becoming a city. Once we become a city, we have to have a road department also. So, if that were ever serious talk, you'd have to think of those implications also. And that time we would be buying more trucks and hiring more employees and building more facilities. So, do I think the water and sewer department is definitely growing. I think in the next few years, if there's more residential development that we're seeing, we'll have the need for more employees, definitely.
So when we have a development, let's say a Magna that's built or Dort Highway, we obviously have a lot of infrastructure that has to go in and we have to supervise. So the project, we mentioned that, we have a couple of large projects this next year that we're looking at. Mm-hmm. Who oversees we hire, let's say, a company to put that infrastructure in the ground. We
do.
And do we hire Rowe that they oversee that project? And
generally, Rowe does the very close project or management. Mm-hmm. I obviously oversee the entire project. I have my assistant director is the township's construction manager also. So he is out on, he's the boots on the ground. He's going to all these job sites, visiting them, making sure our inspectors are there, making sure the contractors have what they need, and we're constantly making decisions. The Rowe engineering, we commonly hire for that. They're the ones that are going to make sure the numbers stay right, that the quantities are right, the billing is right, so on and so forth.
But the more construction we have, does that require more staffing?
It does. It requires more attention to it, that's for sure. The infrastructure projects take time away from operations. It's less time we can spend on the budget, less time we can spend on approving payroll and accounts payable. We still get it all done. But as we get busier, this year was an extremely busy year for us. And it was a bad year to be training a new assistant director and have 2 brand new technicians. But we get everything done just because that's what we have to do.
You said it was a busy year? Or?
It was a very busy year for us. We had a lot of development this year. We had a lot of inspections, and a lot of contract work. So, yeah, it was a good year for us.
In terms of, let's see here, is there anything that is looming out there that, you know, I know some departments, they've held off, you know, in previous years doing some things because the money wasn't there, and so we've got some deferred maintenance type things or whatever. Is there anything looming that, you know, I look at Macomb County and that huge sinkhole, and
Yeah.
I think, gosh, I hope, you know, we don't have anything ever happen
No,
like that.
no, we are very good at taking care of that stuff. Mr. Potter studies our flow data for sewer interceptors. We're looking at one right now that for some reason surcharges every once in a while. We've hired a contractor, Liquiforce, to go out there to televise it, to clean it, to make sure everything's fine with it, so that we don't experience some kind of a break that causes a giant sinkhole. We're very proactive on that.
So there's no fears of anything in the next couple of years that we're
Absolutely
not
not.
addressing?
Absolutely not. We're able to, like I said, the pump maintenance, that's new to us, and that's gonna be a huge help for us. That is something that was looming before, that we've never taken care of because we were, for whatever reason, shy to pull that trigger. But we need to do that. That's what we need to do to keep the pump stations running, to keep sewage out of basements, and, you know, just to keep our infrastructure going strong.
Mentioning the county, and I know that they have some sewer, sanitary sewer situation where we probably are putting more into their system than what they can handle in the north part of the township. Do they have any plans for increasing their capacity at all, or?
Mr. Potter might be able to address
And
that
if
better
they
than
were,
me.
if they were to increase that capacity, would they charge us for
They're-
that?
More than likely, instead of them increasing their capacity, they're looking at us to decrease our I&I, our inflow and infiltration, which is stormwater entering the sanitary sewer system. And keep in mind, the area that you're talking about is a multi-community interceptor. So it's not just Grand Blanc Township that runs into that. It's parts of Atlas Township, Mundy Township, the city of Burton, the city of Grand Blanc, and Grand Blanc Township. We have meters, flow meters in our sewer system so that we know, and we were talking with Mr. Potter about it not that long ago, when there's a rain event, we can tell where we have inflow and infiltration, and we know where we need to go and check to see if there's infiltration in a manhole, if we have a subdivision that has an issue with sump pumps being connected into the sewer. So more than likely what the county wants to see is when they want to see a decrease in inflow and infiltration more than an increase in capacity. Because it costs more money to treat water with stormwater, to treat sewer with stormwater in it, than if they were just treating sewage. You'll never get rid of all of the I&I. It's impossible.
Right.
But they want to see a valiant effort to decrease that more than they are probably going to increase capacity.
So will any of the things with lining the sewers help that, or?
Absolutely.
grouting,
What
or-
we're doing right now, like I said, we've been through the entire township and we've put liners in. Now we're going through and grouting joints and adding liners where we need to. And basically what we do is when we spend the entire spring, summer, and fall cleaning the sewers and televising them, we're looking for cracks, and we're looking for joints that are leaking. We send that footage over to Liquiforce, they evaluate it, and they send us a list of repairs. We generally don't fix everything that they recommend that we fix. A hairline crack can be in the sewer for years and never cause a problem. We look for infiltration. We look at leaking cracks, leaking joints, and we repair that with the Liquiforce stuff, the trenchless repair.
Mr. Potter?
The county's in the process of doing a master plan for the entire sewer system. So that's gonna be about an 18-month endeavor. They'll be looking at each community, and they'll be coming to Grand Blanc and talking to Jeff and whoever else about what capacity the township sees that it may need, what issues, if any, there are, and developing this plan over the next 18 months. To talk about capacity and flow and infiltration, and they're doing it both on the water and sewer side. So over the next 18 months, they're developing two master plans to address those concerns.
So when we, you know, Mr. Manser was asking about prioritization of, you know, our projects, let's say that the county decides that, looking at their master plan, when they put it together in 18 months, that interceptor that's for multiple municipalities, that goes along the north part of our township, that needs to be replaced. Do we get a portion of that bill, or how does that work?
Oh, absolutely.
So they divide it amongst the municipalities that would tie into that
Absolutely,
interceptor?
yeah.
It wouldn't be Mount Morris Township and everybody combined, it would be
No,
just those
it
that are
would be
using it?
the utilities that use that interceptor.
So, Mr. Massey was asking earlier about, unforeseen costs. Well,
Those
if the
are
county
unforeseen
came through
costs.
it and said, we've got a master plan, and we're
Right.
seeing that in the next 10 years, that's gonna need to increase, and we wanna increase it now, we may
Right.
get a bill for that.
Right,
Typically, what they would do with those, they would bond a project of that size and come to the community and say, all the communities that are going to be involved, and sit down and go through the planning process, and then bond for that project. So you'd be looking at a bond payment possibly as opposed to a lump sum dollar.
Okay, over a period of time. And then with the Dort Highway extension, that's planned to begin next spring, I believe, but when would we see our boots on the ground as far as sewer and water?
we're gonna see those in the spring. The plan is at this time is to advertise that project. It's designed, it's fully designed, it has been for a little while now. Our plan is to advertise that for bids, early on this winter, hoping to get good winter pricing. Obviously, the winter time is when all the contractors are looking for work. So, our plan is to advertise it this winter with the construction start early in the spring, as soon as, some of the areas that we have to go into are swampy. So we obviously can't do that during the wet seasons. But, we're planning on getting that going before the road commission gets going on Door Highway.
Okay, all right. Mr. Massey?
Just a comment. Thank you, Director Sears, for mentioning the poorly served pump station for many years.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for your hard work and effort.
thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Mansour?
Mr. Sears, you brought up something that, you brought up something that kind of triggered. So, in the capital improvement projects, you have sanitary sewer here, and we've got, what's the other one, just water.
Right.
Whose responsibility is it for storm sewers, and where would I see that, the impact of like the Dort Highway extension in these plans?
So the storm sewers are completely responsibility of Genesee County.
Okay?
They build them and maintain them. If there's storm sewer that needs to be replaced though, if it's the drain commission, well, both of them will do it through special assessments. The road commission will develop a drainage district and special assess the residents, or they'll just rebuild something on their own via grants. The drain commission does drainage districts, and the township will pay a portion of the drainage district, and then the residents pay a portion, and the drain commission pays a portion. That's all paid through the general fund. So when you review the general fund and the public services budget, you'll see a line in there for drains at large. And that is the line that we're paying special assessments right now on some improvements to the Myers drain, and one out on Cook Road that was just recently done. So we have to pay on that over a certain amount of years. Every year the Drain Commission sends us a letter, says, these are your assessments for this year, this is your amount due.
And then the Dort Highway extension?
The Door Highway extension is, there's only sewer involved in that. There may be a little bit of water down the road that's not in here at this time because we haven't established that project yet as something we have to do. But that is the District 8 improvements. That's the one that goes along with Dort Highway, because the majority of that runs up through the Dort Highway right of way.
That's the Genesis
Correct.
Dort Highway extension?
Yep, it's all
Okay.
tied in together.
We have water in that area already?
We do not, but there's only, along the Dort Highway extension, there's a very small segment that's actually gonna be able to develop. The rest of it is all swampland. It's never gonna be developed. So we're looking at a small piece of water main that could potentially go down from Baldwin Road, down the Dort Highway extension and into the new assisted living
Right.
complex, just to establish a loop there and to enhance efficiency in that system, create redundancy.
Saw somebody else with their hand up. Mr. Atkins?
I'd just like to make a comment about the playland property. You know, as you look at the potential cost to develop that or turn it into a bigger campus, I know a lot of other municipalities, especially in some of the states I've traveled to, I've talked to a few elected people, and they've partnered up with their county when they, come across developing of their municipal campus. And you think about maybe it's something that might be worthwhile discussing down the road with Genesee County, with the road commission. You're gonna have a lot of property, maybe there's an opportunity to, to house some salt tents or buildings for them and have some co-funding with them.
Absolutely.
And the other benefit you get is when the trucks are here, they probably will plow this area a little quicker.
Absolutely,
Or get a little first-rate treatment there, but that may be, something to consider, looking at some funding mechanisms with the county as well.
I agree, and we do know that we're probably not gonna use the entire property. So there will be some property that we can share, sell off, or like you said, develop some kind of a partnership with the county or anybody else who might need some storage space or.
Get together with the city and do something with that.
Well, as you mentioned too, Mr. Sears, earlier, is that, the township had its eye on that property for a number of years. And I know Mr. Potter told me, what some of the prices were in the past that we were looking at, and it was pretty staggering. And so for us to be able to get that parcel at
Absolutely.
the price we did was really a bargain for our township.
100%.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Supervisor, to you, I wanted to compliment Mr. Sears for providing a list of all of the employees that are in his department at this time, including the one you're proposing and is already cost included in your
Correct.
budget for
Yes,
that
ma'am.
one vacant position, even though it was previous here many
Yep.
years ago.
Correct.
We don't have that for every department. I know that several pieces of documentation have been eliminated from this year's budget for the many departments that address actual personnel. And I
Well,
would
only
like-
because of HIPAA violation,
But this doesn't violate HIPAA, this
No.
particular. And so I would suggest that to have accurate count for all employees, that our other departments utilize some similar organizational chart so we can see exactly, we can become more familiar
they
with
did.
names, but we can see how
Yeah.
many people are
What Ms.
actually in
What Ms. Lane is
each department.
referencing in the budget is that in the past, we actually detailed what health plan each individual was on and the cost, which is a clear violation of HIPAA law. So anyways, if you have a concern with that, you can see our personnel director, Colleen Nidzwicki, and I'm glad, you look confused, Mr. Thomas.
Well, this,
Any comment, or?
No, I'm just kind of confused. Are you confused, Lonnie? Trustee Atkins?
I don't want to get off topic, I don't know enough about it, it just doesn't sound right off the surface, but.
Okay.
but I think if we have at least this for each department, that's better than nothing.
At an organizational chart? or is that
Well,
what you're
just
saying?
for their own department,
Oh.
with the,
Well, I think there's only probably a couple departments that, we have the police that it maybe, I know they have more employees, but there's only probably 3 or 4 employees in most of the other departments. So as far as an organizational chart, you've got the department head and the employees that work for them.
But Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
Couldn't you FOIA that information anyways if you wanted it?
Not personnel information.
Personnel information is
No.
not foyable.
Health insurance information is not.
wages are.
Why would we even care what it
I'm not
is?
sure why individuals would want to see people's health
Yeah,
information.
that's what I just said. Sorry.
But anyways, any other questions for Mr. Sears?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah, I
much.
appreciate your time and being here this evening,
Absolutely.
Mr. Sears, and
Can we,
thanks for looking for the,
One thing.
your department more than any probably looks out, 5, 10 years. And
We try to.
you try to have a crystal ball a little bit. And
Right.
I know that that's difficult, and also, you're dealing with a supplier that we don't have control over what those costs are. And thankfully, you know, with the KWA, I think we're going to make some headway.
We're in better
rates.
shape, for sure.
Yes.
Lot better shape.
Thank you.
Okay,
As long as we got the dollar amounts, why would it matter?
Ms. Lane, Ms. Lane?
I thought Mr. Sears might give a heads up to the board. I know that people are getting ready to move all over the township right now for the next few weeks, as far as changes in the building and everything.
We're doing some renovations here in the building department and our copy room. But it's not gonna displace any employees. It's gonna be done over the weekend. So right now, we're moving furniture because we have a painter that's coming in to remove some wallpaper and paint walls. He's doing that at night. And then scaff carpet's coming in to replace some carpeting in those areas also, but that's gonna be done over the weekend. So there's no foreseen interruptions in the building department.
So who's moving around?
Nobody's moving. Everybody's staying in the same place.
No,
We're just doing some
Amy's
maintenance,
moving.
and it'll be done, so
Tuesday
the
meeting.
public won't even,
Amy, our code enforcement officer, may be sitting at the front counter for a week until the renovations are complete. But
but nobody's being moved.
there's
the
no
police department
permanent,
or
there's
anything.
no permanent moves.
And no disruption of service.
Correct. Everybody will still be here working. Thank you.
Okay, let's, anybody have anything they're hearing from the community? Yes, Mr. Atkins.
I do a couple things. As we look at the budget, and as we look at the potential for some increases wherever they may be, time and time again, especially over the last few weeks, keep hearing about how outrageous our taxes are in the township. I think it's interesting. I don't know how you can really get the information out other than keep reminding people, but I promised someone tonight that I would say it out loud, and that is the fact that to Supervisor Bennett's comment a few weeks ago about we only retain 17% of the taxes we take in. That shocks people, that when you tell them that, people that talk about our tax rates, then it, in my case, it shifted the conversation from, hey, the taxes are so high, I think I need to move, to, wow, how do you guys only live on 17%? So,
Yeah,
so
and
it's
actually,
interesting.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think one of the things that we'll do again, Lonnie, is, or Mr. Atkins, in our newsletter, is to put the pie chart that shows where their taxes go, so that they realize, you know, what stays here and where the rest of it goes. Mr. Guzak?
And then if they look at the summer tax that they're paying now, the township is not on there anywhere. Okay, there's a 1% fee at the bottom, but all that stuff that's collected on the summer tax that they're paying, a couple $1,000 or whatever, we don't get any of it. Okay? It's just in the winter where the police kicks in, the fire kicks in, and township operation kicks in for that small
Yeah.
percent.
And Mr. Atkins, another point too that people, I don't think everybody fully absorbs, is that, you know, I've had individuals ask, well, why isn't it important that we have commercial development? You know, I'm happy with what we have now, you know, why do we need any commercial development? And what they don't understand is if they think their taxes are high now, the commercial, I'd like to see a breakdown of how much, you know, I'm sure it's in there, I just haven't dug it out, but, I mean, the commercial businesses, you know, they pay a lot, or commercial property pay a lot more in taxes than a residential.
We do.
And so the bottom line is that we need them to be able to sustain the township and our services, whether, you know, whether it be police, fire, you name it. We need commercial entities in order to help carry the burden. One announcement that was made this week, just in the last few days, was with regard to the Ally Challenge in Grand Blanc at Warwick next year. And they are going to stay with the same time of year, and that they're going to be September 9th through the 15th. They spoke with the pros and what have you, and they seemed to like the time frame that it was in and didn't want to have it moved to August, as some people thought. So they said that music is definitely part of the entertainment, and that their focus right now is actually signing a big name act to headline the show that they're going to have again. So they're
Bigger and
looking to
richer?
upgrade fan viewing areas, what have you. What's that, Mr. Mann?
Bigger and richer?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they
But,
said they were committed.
Yeah, I don't, the article that I'm reading here says that, or have up, is that they're looking for a name act, so maybe that's in addition to who they had
Right,
expressed here, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is.
But anyways, regardless, so that announced, that's great that they're coming back and that they have the dates and,
They're
I think
investing in it, they're improving, that's great.
right,
Actually, they've got a 3-year contract, so they've got
Right.
2 more years guaranteed,
Yeah.
okay?
But they didn't have to do more. The
Right,
point,
they
point
could.
is
They
that
are
they're.
working on extending the contract. The reason I know that, I volunteered it, so I heard some inside.
Ms. Lane?
Well, I would let the board know as well as the public know, we finally got our ballots, and we have been working diligently to get thousands of them done. Today we got through precinct 4, but we have pre-testing of machines and ballots that we have to do to guarantee there is no glitch in the system. So we'll be working over the weekend and through next week and hope to get them out by the 10th, or not the 10th, that's already passed, by midweek next week. But we'll probably have close to 4,000 ballots by that time, and they keep growing.
Clerk Lane,
Yeah, Mr.
through you, Mayor, since someone said we were talking about being the city, Supervisor Bennett,
Yeah.
through you to Clerk Lane, when is it gonna come up for the agenda with the new pay scale for the, workers?
It was discussed in executive staff, and it was the direction to me from the executive staff meeting that if the workers, and they're going to be busy, work past 10 o'clock, that I could authorize
That
the
you'd come to the
payment.
board, that you would come to the board to get authorization for a stipend.
No, you said I could do the stipend rather than come back again.
Mr. Laddie?
We're gonna have to, I'm now recalling exactly the way Ms. Lane did, and unfortunately, we don't have cameras or reporters at that meeting, so we're gonna have to put our heads together and figure out what the direction was.
So we're going to have to be holding up pay to
Well,
No,
them?
you just do it ahead of time.
Rather than bringing up
You just do it
election
ahead of
worker
time.
pay for the 5th time this year, we decided that what our previous discussion was, that our current pay would hold true for the next election in November. The only change would be is the workers that work past 10 o'clock, that Ms. Lane could come to the board and ask for a stipend, a one-time additional amount of money that we would either okay or not okay.
Or is
And
that,
that's the, Mr. Guzak, is that?
Well, and that was gonna be with the normal pay, the normal pay, so you wouldn't have 2 separate runs, because it's
Yeah,
not,
but that's,
so the
the
normal
bottom line
pay is
is
not
that-
the 200, 250?
whatever the last time, the 4th
175,
time that we
200.
went over it, whatever we agreed to then. We can get you a copy of what that is.
But, Mr. Chair,
Yes,
may I make a comment based on what the treasurer said?
sure.
That may not be accurate, what you just said,
what?
treasurer, that'll be one pay. It could,
That was our goal, okay,
well, I
because
said
they,
it could run over into 2 pays. Just keep that in mind, because here's what I'm saying. If a check is cut before the board meeting,
well, we're not gonna cut the check before it meets, that's the whole purpose, okay? To try to streamline it and do one check.
Well, the bottom line is, we'll get the checks written, whether it's one
Right.
check or 2 check,
Right.
we'll work that out. But the bottom line is, the amount of pay is, we're going to stick with what we've already approved. If additional hours are needed, then Ms. Lane is capable of coming back to this board and asking for a stipend. And if there was a glitch and they have to stay 24 hours, I'm sure our stipend might reflect that, so. Rather than bringing it on the agenda, we decided to handle that way.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. I didn't know there was any needed, but I
Well-
thought it was pretty clear, but,
Well, I thought,
Either of those 2 ways is gonna work, that's the bottom line.
right.
Can I ask one more question on operations, real quick?
With regard to elections,
No, Director Lloyd, when does he come up for
let's put that on the agenda for future discussion, because Mr. Lima isn't here, and I really don't want to start a new agenda tonight. So let's talk to Mr. Limata and ask to have that put on a future agenda.
Can I proceed with the board report for
Yes,
Planning
please.
Commission and Metro Alliance? So I missed Metro Alliance because I had a conflict, but in terms of the Planning Commission, which met October 4th, I want to review, just let you know two things. First, there was very little new business to discuss except for the master plan, and Director Lloyd presented his scope of work, his RFP for going out and getting outside services to quote on basically a plan. There was a lot of discussion amongst the Planning Commission members about the specificity of the RFP, thinking that it will result in a wide range of responses because it was very general. But Director Lloyd thinks that that's a good way to go because it will give him some negotiating room. He also is targeting ultimately, well, he has a budget that is less than last time, reflective of the fact that we're taking on some of that work internally. So that's mostly it. Again, a lot of discussion about engagement of the Planning Commission and the board, making sure that we have a high degree of ownership to this, and it's a plan that the people will use rather than put it on the shelf and forget about it. So that's my report from Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mansour. Mr. Thomas, Parks and Rec?
Yep, we're done with future agenda items.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, unless somebody has something they want to add for future agenda. I did make note that you would like to discuss Mr. Lloyd's employment contract.
I was just wondering, because I know it's been over a year.
Well-
With the Parks and Rec, I'd like to set up a meeting with our Parks and Rec. Tonight I did receive the budget for the Parks and Rec and a list of the projects. So if I can meet with the task force.
I think we've got the schedule of the process that we wanted to follow in terms of the setting the goals, what have you. I don't know, Mr. Atkins, I know you were going to meet with, I think, Mr. Limata following the value streaming presentation, or where were you guys at with that?
I don't know right now. I think we need to look at, when we had Sue.
We had one.
I don't know where we are in terms of what we kind of agreed with for the timeline of
Right.
steps. I'm not sure.
I was thinking that you were going to meet following the presentation. I'm not sure.
Three of us were,
The three of us.
Earl, yourself, and me.
Okay. Yeah, would be next steps then.
So I'd
Okay.
like to say that.
But I would like to stick with the timeline that we organized with
That's
Mr.
what
Adwan.
That's
But-
what we have to, the three of us have to
Okay.
meet.
All right. But in terms of the projects, what have you, we're
Yep.
going to stay on the timeline that we established. Okay. Anything else at Parks and Rec?
Nope, totally agree with what you said,
Okay.
Supervisor.
Mr. Massey?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask something of you, please.
Sure.
There's a misunderstanding with the Fire Commission as it regards to the allocation
Study?
study versus a cost study. And this allocation study need to be explained that it has never been mentioned before, up until lately. A few of the members at the Fire Commissioner meeting, on the Fire Commission, is saying that this is something that has been asked for in the past, and that the township would not go along with it. The city requested, and the township did not move on it.
Yeah, that's entirely not true to my knowledge. I've never been presented with the suggestion that we do what we're having done currently. There was a suggestion that a CPA and a meeting moderator
yeah.
be brought in to check over, some numbers, but the study that we're actually contracted, and I'm thinking that in the next month we'll see some results from it, is something that this board actually and our superintendent organized, and I think the first time the city heard about it was when we proposed having done it. We never rejected the city with a similar offer. The only offer I recall from the city was their request to have an independent CPA and a moderator for the meeting. So
You're
I did
absolutely
read what you
Right.
said, what you're discussing. I did read in the Grand Blanc View that a couple of their board members or their commission members, I forget who it was specifically, but I do recall them bringing up that they wish that we would have gone along with them sooner. Well, we didn't go along with their suggestion because we do trust the numbers that the Fire Commission presented to us. We didn't feel there was a need to have any more independent people looking at that, and we didn't feel there was a need for an independent moderator. So what we decided as a board is to move forward with actually looking at the allocation of costs, which is something that hasn't been studied before, and it is looking at what our cost versus the city's cost should be for paying for fire service, and whether, you know, it's looking at the fixed costs and how that should be divided up, as well as, you know, usage cost. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Mr. Massey, and if there's some way that we can help clear up that that issue, I'd be more than glad to attend the meeting and discuss that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the Fire Commission, Mr. Massey?
No.
Okay. Mr. Atkins, anything with regard to Zoning Board of Appeals?
Nothing really to report.
Okay. Mr. Guzak, anything with the Treasury Department?
No.
Tax bills go out next? On which date will they be?
Well, actually, the due deadline, they're already out right now. So, well, no, I'm sorry, they're going out, we have to have our newsletter in, before the end of this month, so that we can get it on the tax bill.
The tax bill will go out like beginning of November 15th?
No.
No, December
December
1st is
1st.
when they go out.
December.
November 1?
Payable in
December 1st, they go out. and
Mr.
then-
Laddie?
And then
No,
it's
that's-
February 15th is February 14th is the deadline, and then normally the township extends the February 14th till the end of the month. It's not an automatic thing, so the tax bill will say February 14th, it will go out on December 1st, and then hopefully I can get the board to extend it till the end of the month. We don't do that until they're actually out.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
The zip code committee is going to be bringing forth a resolution so we can keep pushing that and get the zip code changed for hopefully 48507 and 48442. And the streets and roads have met with Mr. Sears and Mr. Potter, and we'll be discussing that again, finding out how many subdivisions don't have water and how many do. So it's an ongoing study, and I appreciate their help in it.
Holly Springs, you can put them on the list as interested. They're going to be sending you, Mr. Sears, an email requesting estimate on repaving their roads. I think they tried about 10 years ago.
Excuse me, Supervisor Bennett.
Mr. Mansur?
So I have a question about one of the last comments here regarding the zip code. I'm wondering what effectivity it has for us to do a resolution related to that. I mean, we've made our point clear, we have it in minutes, we've documented, as far as I know, we've actually sent documentation out on behalf of the board. So what is an additional resolution, what good would that do?
Mr. Thomas?
The resolutions and everything else that the board adopted was sent by the Chamber of Commerce. The municipality, by federal law, is the one that has to request it. This municipality never officially
never done
requested it. So we have to get that done. Then we can go through the steps with Congressman Kildee.
Our previous board actually did pass a
Yeah,
resolution.
yes.
Wasn't us.
Right, but our previous board did, and we actually did officially request the change and went through all that.
Right, so I'm just wondering. what
The
additional-
concern I have is building false expectations, because we've tried this zip code change for, and, you know, I've only been on the board only probably a quarter of the time, Ms. Lane. But the bottom line is, for the previous board that I was on, we attempted it, and I have had numerous meetings with individuals. I'm not saying that I want to rain on the effort. However, I get calls from people after a meeting like this saying, how come that zip code isn't changed now? You guys took action on it, it's not changed. This is not a sprint. This is like running a marathon or running across the country. The dilemma, we've had private business actually attempt to get their zip code changed in the south part. They actually hired attorneys, what have you, and made a full court press. This is not something that is determined by a legislative body. This is determined by the Postmaster General in Washington. They've received numbers of rejections both locally and nationally. This isn't like, hey, if we would have had this paper signed correctly, we'd have gotten this thing passed. This is more like, we'll try it again, but what you have to understand is, for example, I believe it's Flint Township has 7 zip codes. Mundy Township has numerous zip codes. We have 3 zip codes. If we're going to make the case for why Grand Blanc Township should have 1 zip code, you're going to have a line of other municipalities all making the same argument. What we have to come up with is what's unique about Grand Blanc Township that we deserve to have 1 zip code as opposed to other municipalities, even on our doorstep, having multiple zip codes. Whether it be that, the argument that insurance rates are higher because, you have a zip code with Flint. The post office, that isn't an argument for them. And what they're looking at is service delivery. And does it make sense for them to change the zip code? Because if they change the zip code, it also changes where the mail comes out of and where those carriers come out of. They've got capacity issues at various branches, and if we change zip codes, then capacity at those branches have to change where that mail is being sorted and delivered from. So there's a number of factors besides, hey, we want it to change it. It's going to be a long road to having it changed. We have to have something unique about our municipality that requires them to change it here as opposed to everybody else. I think it's probably a national issue because with GPS and what have you, maybe it's something that they need to realign it nationally, but I don't see any. I see a lot of other issues on the federal agenda besides zip codes at this point. I'm not saying that I don't want to move forward, and I'll be glad to vote in favor of another, resolution, but I don't want the public to think that because we passed a resolution, I get messages on Facebook, I get emails, how come that zip code hasn't changed? Every time we bring it up, it just starts all over again.
One positive thing about the way that we have to do it this time is that we have somebody very proactive that's behind it. And also, if they, from here, our municipality asks for it, goes to Detroit. They deny it. They have 60 days in Washington to make, and then from there, would they have to give us a
Who is it that's proactive on it that wasn't before?
Congressman Kildee.
He was behind it before as well.
No, this one was, I've seen the paperwork that was sent, and this is different.
Okay.
It's a different stepping.
Well, I
It's
hope you're
totally
right.
different.
And I don't think anybody here will have a problem passing a resolution. I'm just saying
No,
that
I
I don't want to put false expectations
Right.
out. Ms. Lane?
I was successful in 1980 to get a great portion of 48507 in 48439, so I dug out that resolution again.
Okay.
We're going to beautify it, and
So
we're going
Ms.
to keep
Lane will
trying.
take this on her shoulders if it doesn't pass?
I'll still keep trying.
Who's that?
And I will too.
Thank you.
I'm gonna start calling Mr. Mayor because we're a city.
It's in
Okay.
1980.
Let's wrap this up.
Different story,
Mr. Laddie,
different time.
anything that you might have?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay. With that,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Support?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, but you
Thank
know
you.
1980 is totally different.